Good afternoon and welcome to this, the sixth in the series of Lunchtime Learning. This one is called Don't Bore the Board, and it builds on the last Lunchtime Learning session we did, which was rolling up the detail. And there are two parts of the same message really, and that is you'll have a short space of time to communicate to the board, use it wisely and keep them engaged and keep them interested. Okay, my name is George Joyce and I work for calQrisk. I'm one of the co-founders of calQrisk. We see ourselves as experienced risk and compliance professionals like most of you listening in today. And we're members of various institutions, whether it's Risk Management or Institute of Bankers or Institute of Directors or Compliance Ireland, different associations in order that we can keep our skills fresh and sharp and being able to talk to you about problems and solutions preferably. Yet we do supply a governance, risk and compliance solution called calQrisk. We renamed the company or used calQrisk as a trading name when we became known as calQrisk after the product. Customers are generally in the financial services sector, the broad sector, and the not-for-profit sector, so sports, charities, housing associations. All right, that's us. As usual, I like a good quote, and I found this one from John Medina, a molecular biologist, who said, and he's written a book on brain rules. This was his rule number 4. We don't pay attention to boring things. So if you have only got 10 minutes in front of the board, keep it interesting. Keep their attention. Now, for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm going to assume that if you're, I'm going to say the chief risk officer or the risk officer presenting to the board, and you want to inform and maybe persuade, not entertain or inspire. So we'll keep it fairly businesslike. So you want to inform and possibly persuade them to do some action. I would suggest that you know what you want from the meeting. If you want a particular course of action, if you want them to agree to take some action, is it just that you want to communicate the current position and get out? Do you know what they want from the meeting? And this is important. If you're going to keep their attention and keep them from being bored, know what they want from the meeting. Yes, they want assurance. If you're talking about risk, they want assurance that it has been well managed. But they also want to know maybe where they should be worried and where they can bring their wisdom to bear on the meeting and contribute, which is why they are there. Some do's and don'ts. Yeah, use more pictures and graphics if you can, and relate the reports, your report, to the objectives that were set by the board. These are, after all, the objectives the organization is trying to achieve, and the reason you're doing risk management is to increase the likelihood of achieving your objectives. You need to assure the board with positives where available that things are under control, and if there are concerns, you need to raise them as well. Don't have lots of detail in the slides. People don't have time and don't want to be reading lots of text. Better to use graphics. And if you present a problem, I think you're probably in the best position to suggest what the options are for a solution, for discussion. And do avoid the use of jargon in meetings. I know it's tempting as a risk person, but try and avoid it. Remember, you want to communicate, you want to get a message across. If you use jargon, that could present a barrier. Okay. This one you will have seen if you were on the Lunchtime Learning number 5. It looks like a lot of detail. It is a lot, but it's a summary. It's a summary of all the risks, of the findings, of key risk indicators. And what you want to communicate, perhaps at a high level, is there's a lot of green. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing well and managing well. And there's also a lot of red in this one. And it's probably the red that you're going to focus on. But you give a summary so people can get the full picture, the green, not just the red. If you're going to focus on, if your presentation is about risks, then it is inevitably about risks and the objectives. So one option, and these are, I'm only giving you some ideas for thought, is to take your 10 or 15 top risks. If you have 5 objectives and you have 2 or 3 risks per high-level objective, and they're high-level risks, you have 10 to 15 risks that you're showing the board. This is one objective, achieving revenue growth of 10% in 2022, and the 3 key risks that threaten that objective. And here in one glance, one view, I can see that 2 of them are red, or at least trending high, and I probably should be concerned. And there's a comment on this. Now, if you have, as I said, 5 objectives, you could probably cover the 5 of them in 2 or 3 slides. Put in some comment, inform, and if there's action need to be taken, then include that. If you want to include detail, put it in the board pack, put it as an appendix. So if your presentation is 10 slides, your appendix might be 30 pages. And you could put in, for example, this is a one-page, single-page report on one risk, and you can see incidents related to the risk and key risk indicators, and the trend in the key risk indicators going from a green to a red. This one was the inflation rate. But put that kind of detail and let the board know the detail is there. I would say maybe you show 1 or 2 of these in your presentation, but keep the rest in the appendix. Use graphics where you can, whether it's to paint a picture of where the risks are in terms of a heat map. A heat map is a good one for communicating, whether the risks are in the amber, red, or down in the green where you hope they are. As a risk officer, you should comment on the compliance position as well, because non-compliance, it is a big risk. There are, in all of your organizations, many pieces of legislation you have to comply with. Now, you probably have a compliance officer as well, but non-compliance is a risk. And I would say comment on that. Reassure the board, if you are 98% compliant, say so, and say that the other 2%, if it is non-material, say it is non-material. If it is material, the board need to know. So use graphics where you can to focus on the high-level stuff, and you'll keep them interested. Key risk indicators. This is underrated and underused to my mind. You should be monitoring things that if they are getting worse, that trend is made visible. Now, I'm using the headings that were suggested by Ariane Chappell some years ago, so I give credit to her for that. But exposure indicators, things that are happening possibly outside of your control, but do affect you, changes in the nature of the business environment, whether it's, interest rates or investment returns, which hopefully now will start increasing. Stress indicators, maybe you've not hired for a long time and you've got busier and people are stressed because now they're overworked. You will probably recognize that in sick days. It could be the systems that you have are getting older and beginning to become unreliable and failing, and your downtime or your uptime is no longer 99%. That might be an indication. Causal indicators, things that are going to cause you problems maybe in a few months. Causal indicators, they're, for example, if you're having a difficulty recruiting people, if you're a school, and I know some of your schools, multi-academy trusts, and you're having difficulty hiring people, is everybody else carrying that load today, and how long can that go on? And failure indicators, probably the most common KRIsk indicator, whether it's measuring complaints or breaches, whether they're minor breaches, and keeping an eye on that. Now, I've noticed that there is a Q&A, and we'll come to Q&A in a moment. And if you have questions, by all means, put them into the Q&A. How do you show those KRIsk indicators? And I'm suggesting that you might have, I'm going to say, 5 to 8 in your organization, things that are pertinent to you. Now, I haven't put any in here specifically. I just want to show the principle that if you show a trend and one figure, if you just show the October figure, it may mean nothing on its own. But if you can show a trend, and you can see I've put in a trend line here at the end, that it was fine for the first half of the year and then began to get out of kilter. And maybe it has leveled off, and maybe you can start recovering from it. But use pictures, especially for key risk indicators. I think that trend line is so important that you get that picture across. And finally, the board is relying on you to be looking ahead, looking externally and seeing, are there things that they should be worried about? Assumptions that they made at the beginning of the year that are no longer true. You know, if the assumption was that inflation will be 3% and now it's 9%, well, they probably know that, but you can probably say what the impact of that would be on the organization. Energy costs, these are ones we know today, but ESG, these are just examples, by the way. In your industry, it may be different, it may be very similar, but you should probably have a slide in your pack that is telling them things that maybe they don't want to know, but things they need to know, so that they you know, are aware and can take action. So hopefully that has given you some inspiration. I've used up the 12 minutes for presentation, and I can see there is a Q&A, so I'll have a look at that question. Can we have a copy of these slides afterwards? Absolutely. Okay. All of these slides and all of our lunchtime learning slides are available to everybody. I'm just waiting to see, is there any more? This is the 6th in the series of lunchtime learning. The other 5 are available on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and go to calQrisk, do subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get an email every time we put up another video. We do short webinars like this, 15 minutes, and we do half-hour webinars as well. So please do subscribe and keep in touch. So I know that was very compressed. I hopefully gave you some ideas. Thank you for your attention. There is one more. Hugh says, how many pages do you suggest for a board report? It depends. If it's a monthly report, recurring report, I would be going for, well, if it's in the board pack, as I said, I would put the details in the board pack. And if my board presentation is going to be 6 slides, 6 pages, then on a monthly one, then there's probably another 20 in the board pack. Don't show the full risk register. Don't show a risk register with 100 risks. Keep it to the high level risks in the board. But you may have a board meeting on a quarterly basis, or at least one annually, where more time will be given to risk management and where the board should be discussing the risk management framework, and certainly more detail will be in that one. But I'm thinking on if you're having monthly reports, then it's over the order of 5 to 10 pages. If it's quarterly, it might be more like 15, and if it's annual, well, on the annual meeting, hopefully you're given an hour to talk about risk, then it might be more. But like I said, I'd keep the detailed text in the appendix and keep the slides in the presentation to graphics that communicate the message more readily. One more. Okay, done. That's it, I think. Okay, folks, thank you for your time and for listening in, and hope to see you back in 3 weeks' time. And we're going to be talking about Stop Seeing Excel. That's where we look at maybe a few more examples of reporting that go beyond a single line in Excel and address this theme in a little bit more depth. Okay, thank you, folks. Bye-bye.